I feel like 2024 was a strangely massive year for the type of music that I hyperfixate on. Like, a lot of very popular albums released that were very good and very experimental, and so did a lot of underground albums that you gotta hunt for and drag out of the woods yourself like you're starving for it. And let me tell you, it has been a great time for me as a music enjoyer, especially one that likes the weird songs. For example, I got that in Plastic Death by Glass Beach. This album came out at the very top of the year, and it was my album of the year for most of it. Glass Beach has been one of my favorite bands since 2019 when their first album came out, and I really looked forward to this album. But Plastic Death took on a darker sound for the band with a more overwhelmed and ominous tone overall, which I really enjoyed. Classic rock and emo had a much clearer impact on the sound, whereas the previous record had this very light and fun energy shot video game sound with emo lyrics. Truly, this record distinguished Glass Beach as a separate project to Jay's other work, which tends to have a similar sound. I do feel like the album's kind of missing something in that there's not a singular concept that is being followed. The first album had a very clear-cut story from front to back, and it had a pretty singular concept. While I don't think it's a deal breaker, I do think the lack of story is definitely noticeable, as it does feel like there's much less of a focus as opposed to something like the first Glass Beach album or something like even the Casio Dad releases from back in the day. My favorite song is by far The CIA. That breakdown at the end is just absolutely gobsmacking, mouth-wateringly great, breathtaking. Honorable mention goes to Cold Can't, which has a really cool music video. Puppy, which is just a really fun song, and Rare Animal because they've been playing that one for years, and it's really good to finally see it get out. Moving along to an even weirder album, though, the new sound by Jordy Creep. I think I texted a friend of mine who had recommended the album to me, and I think my first reaction was something along the lines of, what did I just listen to? This album is loud and disturbing and unhinged in the way that, like, analog horror is.
It gave him a bat credit card?
This album is just so all over the playlist and nonconformist. It's not just one genre, it's just music, and I think that's great. You can convey so many ideas through sound that lyrics can't quite capture, and I feel like this album says so much at the same time, while also experimenting so heavily with the sound. A lot of times in music, one takes precedence over the other, but I feel like the experimentation of instruments and the depth of the lyrics all remain in balance. The whole album reads like one full mental breakdown ramble, just a word vomit, and it's satisfying with how much energy it puts out and forces you to give up on each listen. My favorite song is easily Holy Holy, which has a really good setup and reveal for its storyline that it's trying to tell, and a really cool music video at the same time. Another album that I unexpectedly really liked this year is G&X by Kendrick Lamar. Let me tell you, Kendrick has completely taken over my life this year, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to have a whole video about this sometime soon. But, oh my goodness, it's so bad, man. G&X is an amazing album about oppression and trying to be a real member of not just your community, but a real person that is comfortable in your own skin, rejecting the world around you. I really do think this is the sort of album that you have to experience for yourself. As somebody who is a very new Kendrick fan, as in this year becoming a Kendrick fan, I love this album. My favorite song off of it is easily TV Off. I just think it's such a great thesis statement for the album as a whole, and it really captures everything that I had just said the album was about. I really want to make a video where I cover Kendrick Lamar and my relationship to his music in the near future, so be on the lookout for that. An album that I can talk a bit more about, though, is by Tyler, the Creator. Tyler cooked with this album. Personally, I'm really torn between two specific albums for picking which one was my favorite album of the year, and it's a different album and this album, because this came very close to being my favorite. The album is a massive study of Tyler's identity as an artist, a black man, a queer individual, and a survivor of this Aurora Borealis cycle of culture. The sudden shock of build-up and payoff has me feeling paranoid, like, yeah, I get it, Tyler. Thank you, Tyler. I understand why you're paranoid. This is also the most upfront Tyler has ever been about his own issues, his own struggles, and it's the first time that he's really not playing that much of a character. My favorite song off this album switches pretty much every day, pretty much every time I listen to this album. Recently it was Like Him, sometimes it's Saint Chroma, but as of the writing of the script for this video, it's Ra-Ta-Ta. If you haven't listened to any rap, pause this video, go listen to Chromacopia. It's helped me get into rap a lot. I just love the experimentation and the mastery of the craft on display, especially when you consider where Tyler comes from and his evolution as an artist to make an album like this. Another band that evolved heavily this year is Carver Commodore with their album Carver. Carver is easily their best album yet. As a band, Carver has always kind of strived for this video game dad rock sort of sound, at least that's the vibe I get. And I feel like they've really come into their own with this album because there's the most experimentation, the most signature style that I've seen from any of their releases thus far. Every song is packed with a lot of energy, with a lot of synthesizers, with a lot of unique sounds that are flooding the mix and just leaving you awestruck the whole time. Not to mention, the album is just fun. It's just a really good time in general. My favorite song off the album is Wave, although Opinionator is a very close second, and Stone Cold Stunner is a very close runner-up third. I do think it's worth mentioning this year that I did get pretty obsessed with Frank Iero and Gerard Way's solo music for a hot minute. Even though they didn't make any solo releases, it was the 10th anniversary of Frank Iero's album Stomach Aches, in which he released the deluxe edition of it called X Nauseous X. And I also just listened to Hesitant Alien a lot. That's Gerard's album. These individuals are both massive inspirations for me in my music. I especially love the way that Frank Iero experiments and the way that he uses his voice. I especially love the way that Frank Iero is constantly experimenting with the instrumental. You can never quite expect what the Frank Iero song is going to sound like. And I've always been head over heels for the way that Gerard Way shows his stagemanship. I think while I'm detouring to something that's outside the scope of the video, I should also probably mention Good Luck Babe. If you've been living under a rock and somehow don't know, Good Luck Babe is a single that blew up this year by Chaperone. And technically it falls outside the subject of this video because it wasn't an album, which has been the focus. It was just a single, but I feel like I would be murdered and also committing blasphemy if I didn't mention it. But another really good artist that you probably haven't heard of is Kickflips. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to censor her name, so I'm just going to say what she calls herself in her videos. Miss Kickflips is something else of a person. I actually discovered her through her YouTube channel, which is pretty great. She makes a lot of these very handheld, very homemade style videos about art and about the way that art is perceived and the way that art is generated, whether it be about guilty pleasure art or it be about otaku fashion and how that's perceived in media. And obviously her music is great. It's this odd mix of grunge and noise rock and webcore, and it's just kind of a mess, but in a way that just really encapsulates Kickflips. My favorite song is easily Vodka Lemonade. It's easily one of the messiest songs, and that's kind of why I love it. I really like that messy aesthetic. I really like the sort of arcade sounds that are factored in. It's a really good time, and so is really the rest of her EP. It's a very short EP. You should listen to the whole thing. And the last album I'm going to talk about today is the reason that I'm making this video, my album of the year, Clancy by 21 Pilots. I've been trying to get into 21 Pilots for a long time, and this is the album where, for some reason, the band just kind of clicked with me, and now I like all of their discography. I think I know every track of this album by heart, and I think that it's an absolutely beautiful ending to the lore of Trench. Clancy just kind of hits all my buttons right. I don't know how to describe it, man. It just works for me. The first time I heard this album was in October, so I was really late to the punch for this. But it was my first trip back home ever since moving to university, and I was alone in the house for a couple minutes, so I laid on my bed. I was playing Minecraft on my Switch, and I was listening to Clancy finally, and something just hit right. I was listening to the Craving Jenna's version, and something in me just kind of clicked, and I just started boo-hooing right there on the bed. And I tell you, I was sobbing, I was shaking, I was crying, and this album really hit me in a deep way by the time it came back around to Paladin Strait. I have not felt the same since then. I think I've just had a lot more time to reflect on this album and think about how important it was to me throughout the latter half of the year, really only since October. It makes me happy to finally be a 21 Pilots fan, especially as this year I did a lot of experimenting. I did a lot of looking into new music genres, into looking into artists I wouldn't normally look into. I didn't even know that Jordy Griep was a member of Black Meaty because I hadn't listened to Black Meaty before, and now I'm thinking about maybe I should go listen to Black Meaty. I think it was a great year to try new things. I tried new things. And now 2025 is here, so new year, new me. I can't wait to try out even more stuff. I'll have a playlist in the description of some of the highlights off all the albums I mentioned. And with that, I think we've run out of time for this video. So, subscribe to my music. That's my main project. You can stream it on YouTube Music, and I'd appreciate your support. If you enjoyed my video, I'd appreciate a like and a comment as well. And I am going to illegally climb on top of the New York City Ball so I can get a great view on New Year's Eve. Goodbye.